Hello, hello. Kim here today. It's Thursday. And I was thinking about it. And even though I've been doing research in other groups, I'm going to go back to the Kingston group because I have some historical information on the group as far as its founders, the actual Kingston clan. And so I hope you enjoy this because the Kingston family has ties to Mormonism, beginning with Charles Williams' grandfather, Frederick Kingston. Now, I misspoke the other day when we were covering the Kingston clan. Charles Williams is the father of Eldon Kingston, who was the founder of the Kingston clan, or the Davis County Cooperative, or the Order, whichever group you want to call it, or whichever name you want to go with. So, the family's ties to Mormonism begin with Charles Williams' grandfather, and he was over in England. And while he was there, that's where he was from, is England. He saw an altercation on the street, and he stepped in to protect the person who was being attacked. That person turns out to be Orson Pratt, who is a big name in history of the LDS Church. And so later on, Charles Kingston traveled to America, and while he had a strong, I don't want to say hatred, but prejudice against the Mormon church and Mormonism. After he came to the United States, he too converted. And after he converted, he was baptized, served mission, and he held several ecclesiastical callings within the church. Now, Charles Williams was the oldest of 11 children born to Charles, excuse me, need some more water. Born to Charles Kingston and Mary Priscilla Tucker in the town of Croydon, Utah. And Charles Williams' spiritual development was marked by dreams that he believed to be manifestations of revelations and divine guidance. The records he left of these visions were written many years after the fact, often in pamphlets or personal histories, as justifications for his path. And these were justification for his path towards excommunicated. Because yes, he was excommunicated. And the LDS Church didn't have support for Charles Williams' son's budding group. So Charles Williams' first recorded spiritual experience took place on the bank of the Weber River in Morgan, Utah. Sorry, I'm trying to be really still so the chair doesn't squeak. So on the banks of the Weber River in Morgan, Utah, where he was being baptized and confirmed. While kneeling in the sand near the river, Charles Williams recorded, "The power of God came over me, and I was tingling with joy from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet. Every cell and fiber of my being, a great and fixed desire came with this power to be steadfast in keeping the commandments of God and to do all in my power to further the cause of Zion here on earth." Now, this experience Charles Williams considered to be most influential in his spiritual development. The experience that Charles Williams considered most influential in his spiritual development came in a dream that occurred a year after his baptism. So that would have been in because he was born in I think he was born in 89. It's 8 years old when you're baptized. So it would have been in right around 1900. We're just going to say 1900. Because math was never my strong suit. His records finding himself in a large building accompanied by some of his neighbors, who seemed unconcerned and satisfied with their condition. Charles William left the building, but found that the only exit outside of the building was through a dark hole, which impressed him as being the entrance to hell, leading down to the river of deconstruction. So he went to a corner of the room and began to pray for deliverance. And his prayer, Charles Williams saw a person dressed in white robes standing above him. The person lifted him out of the house and pointed him to the east, saying, "Son, get on your feet, that path, and never let your feet get off of it." The path was a ribbon leading east, the same direction as the dark tunnel, but tending upwards over a mountain. Charles Williams took up the path vigorously and encountered lucrative opportunities along the way, but the messenger's words of fire dissolved any temptation to pursue them. Although Charles Williams ran along the edge of the path by his fingertips, after exerting all his energy. I think I read that last line wrong. Let me start over. Though Charles William ran along the path for miles, he eventually became overconfident and slipped, catching the edge of the path with his fingertips. After exerting all of his energy, he pulled himself up, fearing that he would fall again. Charles William crawled along on his hands and knees, maintaining a firm grip the rest of the way. When I reached the other side, I stood up and walked on with a thankful heart. To know the Lord had preserved my life to attain such heights, that I was safe after being so near to destruction. So that was I'm going to call it a revelation. It was like a revelatory dream. And it really proved to Charles William that he was on the right path. If he followed this path and didn't veer off of it, to him, that was the way to go. And if he followed it, he would be safe. Excuse me. So let's see. Dreams of redemption were common in Charles Williams' family. After his own baptism, his father dreamed he was trapped in a large stone enclosure. After praying for deliverance from the fearful darkness, a bright light appeared over his head, and he distinctly heard the air cut by what appeared the descent of 7 heavenly beings, all dressed in flowing white raiment, reaching to their feet. These beings encircled him about, one of which had a two-edged sword in his hand, which he held up, pointing upward, with his arm bent at the elbow. Neither spoke, but as he continued to pray, the vision closed. So, Charles William's father, Charles, had these dreams. Charles William had these dreams. And we're going to find out in a little bit that his son Eldon had these dreams. So, a little about Charles William's life that will lead to help further the story later on. On the 17th of May in 1906, Charles William married Vesta Minerva Stowell in the Logan Temple, and shortly thereafter was called to the Eastern States Mission, where he proved to be very successful. He recorded, "I held the book record for the sale of the most books of Mormon for 3 consecutive months. I also revived the practice of preaching the gospel without purse or script in New York and New Jersey districts." And I promise I did read this ahead of time. So after his mission, Charles Williams spent many years doing agricultural work with his father in Grover, Wyoming, and Ammon, Idaho. Ammon, Idaho is a very small town just outside of Idaho Falls. Or at least back then it would have been a very small town. Still a small town, but not as small as it would have been back then. Multiple crop failures nearly broke him financially, so he considered it a blessing when the Oregon Short Line Railroad hired him in 1922. As was often the case with railroad employees at the time, he faced a tragic accident after only 1 month on the job. While jacking up one of the freight cars in Idaho Falls, the jack slipped and the handle hit me right under the jaw, breaking the jawbone on both the right and the left side. The recovery for this injury entailed 10 weeks in the hospital. And despite this accident, Charles William was promoted after 4 years to acting mechanical foreman at Silver Bow, Montana, and 3 months later to acting car foreman at Idaho Falls. His new position required him to travel once a month to Salt Lake City. Now by car, that's about 4.5 hours. So by carriage or horseback, it's a lot longer than that. Of course, he did work for the railroad, so he may have gotten train passage, which would have been quicker. Okay, so he was also given 2 days of paid time off each month, which he spent at the Salt Lake Temple, feeling he owed his vacation time to the Lord for the blessings. So he's giving up all of his free time to work at the temple. And let's see. Charles marks this period as a critical point in his spiritual journey. He spent much time in Salt Lake with his childhood friend Charles Zitting, often sleeping in his office. Charles William recounts that Zitting's father had been a Jack Mormon. And if you don't know what a Jack Mormon is, that's somebody who is Mormon, has been baptized Mormon, but they don't follow the laws, like they'll drink coffee, they'll swear, they'll drink alcohol. They just don't live the covenant life or stay on the life of the covenant path. And that's a Jack Mormon. And Zitting's father made fun of Charles William because he drove a team 9 miles regularly, so my family and I could attend meetings and our duties in the church. But he writes that Zitting stayed committed to the gospel because of his own example. I taught Charles Zitting many things about the Lord's work. When Charles grew up, he taught me the provisions for the fullness. So, we have a Jack Mormon who's listening to somebody who has a strong spiritual relationship with the church, has revelatory dreams. So the Jack is listening to the good practicing Mormon who later teaches the good practicing Mormon about his way of life. So, for 2 years, Charles William attended the temple with Zitting once a month and spent hours in discussion with him. Brother Zitting taught me many things, Charles William recounts. Even the fullness of the gospel, the fact that no apostle could hold an office in the church unless he could prove to the heads of the church that he had embraced the principles of celestial or plural marriage as explained in the 132 section of Doctrines and Covenants. So that's D&C 132. Zitting also introduced him to people who had rejected the 1890 manifesto ending plural marriage and went on the underground as a means of practicing their religion. So I'm going to leave this here for today. Tomorrow we will pick up with more of Charles William Kingston's story. It's actually quite interesting as it goes on. When he decides that, maybe I should take up and practice polygamy. My grandfather did it. Maybe I need to do it too. Maybe, But the church did realize what he was doing. Even before he began to practice. So, we will pick up with that tomorrow. And what I'm reading today is actually from sunstone.org. And Sunstone is an they're classified as a forum examining and expressing the rich spiritual, intellectual, social, and artistic aspects of history and the contemporary life across the Mormon movement. So it's not just for TBMs, which we've talked about many videos before as True Believing Mormon. We maintain our publications and recordings on the website so that each new generation can explore and interrogate the past effects on Mormon community as a culture. They are a historical and educational group. And I know they do have activities every year in Utah. And they have speakers who are Mormon and former Mormons. But where these are journals and documents from Charles William. Where better to get this information? And again, we're building up to Charles Williams excommunication and also Eldon Kingston's beginnings of the Kingston clan. Okay, so we'll talk to you later. And just remember, tomorrow's Friday! So have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.